Pinky and the Brain, Issue 23. It starts with Brain in a room with a barred window like it's a jail. So why is there an aquarium and chemical vials? Why is he here? Pinky startles Brain having his reflection appear on the other side of the glass, and he generously feeds brine monkeys. Brain's right. Ridiculous. How can anything so small make a pet of any kind? He can't pet them. What's the point? Pinky says he could watch them for hours, and Brain says he saw him watch TV test patterns for hours. Pinky's lucky he's so easily entertained. Pinky says it's like there's a whole other world in there. And sadly, this is just an excuse for a story where Pinky and Brain are sea monkeys, with no explanation about why they're sentient and have white snouts and red noses. By sheer coincidence, a scientist had genetically altered sea monkeys in there. Why would anybody make a sea monkey super smart when it'd be too small to observe and do much that's interesting or useful? I'd prefer if the story started here and I could assume this was a parallel universe. It just seems less likely that there's two people like Pinky and the Brain. Brain says his king, by constantly adding to his castle, is making it harder for his life-giving chest to work, somehow. Why does he have the chest? Brain wants some attention, so he tells Pinky to make a noise with his hands that he hates. That's creative when he could have just shouted. So, why isn't everyone gurgling when trying to talk underwater? I guess they are, but it's fine because they're all used to it and can breathe. Brain says the king is placing the building of his palace over his people's well-being, and the people are all brave enough to say they don't want the king right below his tower where he's looking down at them. Brain promises better filtering if they make him the leader. So this story makes a mistake of making Brain in the right for wanting to take over the tank. Now I'm gonna wonder why him failing will be considered a happy ending. Brain gets told by the king's goons that this is an unlawful assembly, and he and Pinky are banished. And a big guy threatens them into complying and kicks them into the wall of the tank. Pinky points out a pipe, and Brain says he's discovered the filtration device that delivers fresh air-filled water to the giant treasure chest in the heart of town. Brain says the tubes make all life possible in the tank, so he decides to shut down the filter and come to the people's rescue when they realize they're in danger, which he thinks would cause them to make him the king. That'd only work if they all rushed at the king's goons at once. The king himself wouldn't give up the throne swim. Brain considerately warns Pinky to stay away from the snails or avoid getting slimed. Pinky puts his hand near the intake thing to point it out, and Brain warns him to take his hand away from there because they'd get sucked in. Meanwhile, he's holding Pinky's hand like it's nothing, purely to justify him getting sucked in, because Pinky likes holding his hand. Pinky thinks being sent around the tube is fun, and they get sent out of the chest. But it turns out the big goon of the king is heading towards them as he warns people of a coming environmental disaster. I guess makes sense, he's strong, so he'd be there to guard the most important part of the tank. Pinky uncharacteristically wishes they could quit the plan after they get kicked away, when he should know Brain wouldn't agree. Brain plans on blocking the filter with a rock until the king abdicates. Why would he know that abdicating would save the tank? Because Brain would tell him. But if he told him that, it'd make it too obvious that Brain's the one who blocked the filter, because how else would he know that the king abdicating would save the tank? If Brain could swim up here and put in the rock, then anyone could save the tank. Pinky helps him lift the rock, and he gets sucked in, and somehow that doesn't knock out the big guy. He just stands there and deadpans out. Brain tries to lift a bigger rock as a result, and Pinky says they can block the filter here. And Brain gets freaked out because there's a tube coming out of the filter. They hold onto the tube as it sprays, and the sheer force of the spraying causes it to bend, smacking them into the tank's ground, and they get sent out of the tank. The tube sprays the normal Brain, and Brain says he should have used Pinky's head to block the valve. Pinky tells him to look on the bright side, but when they get slammed into the glass again anyways, Brain thinks that Pinky is a jinx, which is unscientific thinking. Then later he tells Pinky that his buffoonery paid off for him because the filtration system is out of commission. It's nice of Pinky to ask how he learned to tie such beautiful bows. He says he learned how to by spending years in the Sea Scouts. Why did scientists genetically alter all of these brine monkeys to be sentient? They just wanted to be able to observe them for entertainment. But they could only do that if they put little cameras and microphones in the tank. So I have to assume they're hidden there to have this make sense. Why are Pinky and Brain the only ones that look the way they do? If all of them are genetically altered to be sentient, I guess they started out as mice? Brain tells the people to make him their king if they want the filter restored. It's smart of him to call himself the all-knowing Brain, because maybe they need to be told that he's a genius to have any reason to believe he could fix the filter. Pinky wants to be their new prom queen as well. He's so entertaining. It helps that he's such a nice guy. They agree, but the king's wise enough to get the impression that this is a trick, which makes sense because how would he have known there'd be an environmental disaster ahead of time if he didn't plan on causing it? He decides to follow Brain to see what he's up to, even though all they'd see is him fixing it and he'd look like a good guy, as far as they know anyways. It's just really good luck for the king that for some reason Brain fails because there's an air bubble in the tube for no reason, causing a part of it to swell. I really wish I knew why there was an air bubble there. Brain and Pinky start stomping on the tube to try to dislodge the air bubble. Brain blatantly says that this is why they're doing that, so the king and his people would hear him and not think they're trying to tamper with a filter tube. It'd make more sense if he did hear Brain and he was just jumping at an excuse to keep himself in charge. The swelling tube hides Brain and Pinky has no reason to call attention to himself. Brain says the big guy dislodged the air bubble with his weight on the tube. The big guy complains about an air bubble avalanche. But as Brain and Pinky swim away from their enemies, it doesn't look like anything's happening to them. They're just being sent falling over for no reason. We should have clearly seen what happened to them. Brain goes back to town and gets carried around in a king's outfit. But then he gets threatened by a giant fish out of nowhere because the normal Pinky put it in the tank, which makes sense because the tank's for sea creatures and the fish is a sea creature, so he didn't think ahead. But still, Pinky had no excuse for this because Brain says he told him this was a stupid idea. He knows Brain's a genius, so he trusts his judgment. To be fair, Brain's wrong a lot, and misses some things a lot, and Pinky has to warn him that some of his plans have holes in them, but it was still common sense that the fish might end up eating the things smaller than it, like the brine monkeys, because that's always how big animals treat smaller ones, if they're carnivores. So that was dark. Brain comforts Pinky, having his hand on his shoulder, and says, "Don't feel bad, Pinky," and says it's just a circle of life. Pinky sniffles, regretting what he did. And Brain cares enough to warn him that next time he should pick his pets more carefully. Pinky says he already has an idea for it, and for no reason Brain tells him not to tell him about that idea right away, even though Pinky's accident prone and can't be trusted. So we see a small monkey in a teacup as the story ends before we could see the results. In the next story, we see the Wicked Witch of the West somehow get killed by water. You'd think a witch would make herself immune to that anyways. And Pinky and Brain are watching it through a crystal ball across from their cage. Brain says that with the witch gone, he can finally take over Oz. Pinky says he's wanted that since he was refused charter membership in the Lollipop Guild. And Brain says someone needs to liven things up because Oz is boring. He's trapped in a cage, of course he's bored. It seems out of character for him to say that. It's Pinky who'd want to liven things up with roller coasters. Pinky points out the winged monkeys to him, which are playing cards and gambling at a table below them outside of a window. Pinky says everyone starts sneezing when they're around due to all the airborne monkey dander. So Brain decides to try to take command of the winged monkeys. I like that even though this rips off Wizard of Oz, it's a sequel, so it still feels like it's worth it. But I wish I didn't have to just assume Brain came here with his technology or a witch did it. I just have to assume the place they live in is the residence of a witch. He lampshades that the Wicked Witch wasted these monkeys' talents. The next panel has nonsensical dialogue, and Pinky considerately warns him to be careful around the winged monkeys, and thinks they're so wild that only the witch could keep them in line. Brain says that's where Pinky comes in. Rather than him simply planning to brainwash the monkeys like I thought, he's gonna have Pinky wear a bad disguise as the Wicked Witch. Pinky says he'd rather be a ballerina or ice princess. To be fair, witches would be able to shapeshift and shrink. So as long as he sort of resembles her, which I still don't think he does, The monkeys would be justified in believing it's her because they don't know that talking mice like Pinky exist. So the sheer fact that they'd see one would prove that's the witch to them, because only she could be responsible for something that supernatural in their lives. Or the so-called good witch. They could think it was her. Brain says he'll infiltrate the monkeys' group and try to convince them the wicked witch only shrank. He'll need to include in shapeshifted too, and he'd know that. He'd also know he looks absolutely nothing like the winged monkeys, so they'd only believe him that he's one of them if he lied that his appearance was changed by another witch. If Snowball could change his appearance perfectly fine to look like Brain, why doesn't he change his appearance to look like a winged monkey? Brain says he's flying with motorized wings, and he gives Pinky a rocket-powered broom. The flying monkeys want to know there's talking mice that could fake having wings or flying brooms by inventing stuff, so it makes sense that even if they see that they look nothing like they're supposed to, they'd think they have to be telling the truth. Because why else would they have wings and a flying broom? I just wish they'd be written to say that. Pinky presses a button for no apparent reason and makes Brain's broom rocket around the room and hurt him. The monkeys hit Brain a lot, because they assume it's a bat they'd never see or even know about. So that was pathetically forced. Pinky lies that Brain's a flying monkey to save him. And when one of the monkeys wonders why he's so small, he says he accidentally left him soaking too long in the wash with his dainty underwear. And when asked why he's so white, he says he used too much bleach. And the monkeys believe him. It sure is convenient that when Brain says the monkeys are dumber than Pinky, right in front of one of them, he gets no consequences for it. He tells Pinky good thinking and gets thanked for it. Brain starts sneezing, and he has the stupid idea to plug his nose to make sure he won't, when it's a very bad idea to not sneeze if you need to. It's gonna want to escape somewhere. Pinky's not sneezing because a false nose has him only able to smell spirit gum. The story's trying to make more sense than The Wizard of Oz by having the flying monkeys cause people to sneeze. But I'm wondering why that didn't happen in The Wizard of Oz then. It'd make more sense if Brain put sneezing powder on them. Brain tells the flying monkeys to fly to the castle, and they fly over other places on the way, causing people to sneeze. Sure is a shame that the so-called Wicked Witch didn't have access to any magical artifact that could just teleport Brain directly to the castle. Brain tells someone to sign a petition pledging allegiance to him so we'll get them to leave. Wouldn't he know that a contract made under duress is null and void legally? And he has this happen over and over again, like in the grove of talking trees in the mountain with a talking boulder who sneezes boulders. Their biology is completely different, so why are they allergic to monkey dandruff? And Brain tells Pinky to get a new catchphrase, explaining why he kept saying that one quote of the witches when it made no sense in context. Eventually a bubble flies towards them containing Gilbert Gottfried, the Good Witch, who's still dressed up like a woman anyways. A kid warns him about what Brain's doing, and he tells them that all they need to do to get over their sniffles is to follow the yellow brick road. And realistically they get mad at him because that's what good witches always say, apparently. Why couldn't he just use magic to instantly cure their problem? Or a magical artifact? Is that why they're mad? One of the people says he could have given them a lift to the Emerald City in its bubble. He should have heard that. Why didn't he do that? So Glinda the Good Witch looks like either a jerk or idiot if she could have done that and didn't. Maybe the theory is right. Maybe she did want Dorothy to go on her adventure so she could get the evil witch killed. I guess she can't teleport, so that's why she didn't just teleport to the witch and kill her herself. For some reason, after Brain and Pinky antagonize him, telling him to leave Oz to them, he doesn't use magic against them and end the plot, but instead explains that there's a lot more good witches out there now. I guess the reason that's new is that they're recent immigrants from the other realm. It would feel annoying if Gilbert used magic to get rid of the flying monkeys, or Brain and Pinky, or brainwashed them to changing their minds. Because the second he showed up I was annoyed, because he could have easily not shown up. But now I have to assume he doesn't have any of the powers I mentioned. Brain and Pinky look at the Emerald City, and Brain tells Pinky to write an ominous message in the sky with the smoke from his broom. He calls that an ominous message? It was a predictable joke that he wouldn't make it ominous, which makes sense because he's not evil and knows he could get away with this. I guess with all the times Brain hits him, it makes sense that he'd want to do something independently. He must have picked this message just for a joke. Brain tells Pinky to come along with him with a squad so they could confront the wizard. You'd think the wizard would be able to use magic against them to kill them, shapeshift them, or change their minds if he's being antagonized. But I suppose it's supposed to make sense because he's too busy sneezing to use any magic. That would be too distracting for him. Then the Lollipop Guild from earlier shows up, with their noses plugged so that they can't be made to want to sneeze by the flying monkeys. They aren't acting like they want to sneeze, so this implies they're outright immune to them, making Brain's nose plug a good decision. The guild starts a fight with dust clouds showing up for no reason, but Brain escapes the dust and pulls Pinky along with him. He says he's got an idea about how to get away from Oz and all of these distractions that ruin his plans. It says that being ruler of someplace else has got to be better than ruling a nut house like this. It's impressive that he smartens up here. He tells Pinky that on cue, he has to signal the monkeys to attack the wizard and throw him and the girl out of the balloon. If this is taking place after the Wizard of Oz, why is Dorothy back? And why would she bat the entire story? I guess for a joke, but it's not funny. Pinky feels like sneezing because there's a cat around. This doesn't make any sense because he clearly said he can't smell anything with a fake nose strapped to his face. And the rule of this issue is that when you have your nose plugged, you can't feel like sneezing because you're around something. And being unable to smell for another reason would have the same effect. Also, there's been no indication that Pinky was ever allergic to cats. It wasn't very likely that there'd be a cat near him here. There's even a short in The Animaniacs where he was near a cat, and all that happened was the cat ate him. He never acted like he was allergic to it. So this isn't a believable way for the plan to fail. Can mice even be allergic to cats? There's way too many times where the plan fails where it only happens because the writer wrote himself into a corner and now has to make up some ridiculous excuse for it to fail. If it failed for a believable reason, I want to be frustrated and feel bad for someone that the show doesn't want us to root for. Pinky apologizes and sneezes his fake nose off, which is impossible because it was strapped on. If he just changed Pinky's body so that he looked like the Wicked Witch, which he could do because Snowball made himself look like Brain, this never would have happened. The cat attacks Brain and Pinky and a dust cloud shows up for no reason. The girl's dog jumps out of the balloon to attack. Then one of the flying monkeys says Pinky's not the witch because he lost most of his disguise. And the monkeys start attacking them too in a huge dust cloud that's there for no reason. In a franchise that usually doesn't censor slapstick and destroy anything good about it. As the balloon starts flying away, Pinky and Brain at least manage to grab onto the rope hanging from it and fly away. But they end up ditched in a desert. The wizard dumped them there the minute they got to Kansas, and Pinky says it's his fault for trying to take over the balloon. Brain says it's force of habit, but that doesn't explain it. It was common sense of a little mouse to not try to antagonize a wizard. That's why I assumed he wouldn't try to cause the people in the balloon any trouble. Pinky says he at least left them a lollipop, and he has no reason to get it close enough to his head to get it stuck to it. The first story by Jesse McCann is about Brain and Pinky as sea monkeys trying to take over a tank that Pinky owns. I don't like that I'm not told why the brine monkeys are all sentient, and I have to just assume they're genetically modified. It was an interesting plot, taking advantage of it being in a tank because Brain had to damage the filtration system and then say he'd fix it if people made him the king. And eventually that did happen, even if one of the king's big goons falling on it was what fixed it. But that didn't matter because of the jarringly dark ending. He gets eaten by a big fish Pinky put in the tank, which wouldn't have happened because Brain told him not to. The worst part is, it was made clear at the beginning that the king is in the wrong. His adding to his castle supposedly put the entire tank at risk. So we were rooting for Brain. The second story by Jesse is about Brain and Pinky trying to take over the land of Oz that they're at for no explained reason. And it's an engaging story that just barely makes sense because Pinky's impersonating a witch, so the monkeys assumed she just changed forms after being splashed. At that point, you'd think that Pinky losing his nose wouldn't make them think he's not the Wicked Witch, because they don't know that talking mice can exist. So they would think he's just the Wicked Witch, but she had to wear a fake nose because she wanted to look more like herself, and this was the best she could do. It'd be more believable if Brain simply brainwashed the monkeys. and his brainwashing thing could get destroyed later. Brain takes advantage of a brand new fact that everyone sneezes when around the flying monkeys because of their monkey dander. It makes me wonder why this wasn't the case in the original story, if it wasn't. So it should have just been explained that he put sneezing powder on them. But the plan fails because somehow Pinky sneezes from a cat that could have easily not been around. Even though he said that he can't smell anything beyond the fake nose he's wearing, and it's strapped on. So why would a sneeze take it off? So it's frustratingly forced how they failed. But in general, I did like reading the story. It was interesting to read a sequel to The Wizard of Oz.